As it exists now, academia is largely secular, and I don't expect that to change.
It just doesn't seem to be the issue that I might have imagined it would be.
In a university such as this one, a secular institution, is it a healthy place for debate on religion versus science? I would say they definitely peacefully coexist.
When I was a teenager, I read the Narnia books by C.S. Lewis.
Good books.
Yeah. Of course, they're famous now because they've been made into movies, or some of them have. Back then, they were just the books. But the books, have a lot of Christianity sort of woven into them. It's not explicit, and to tell you the truth, when I read them, I didn't realize that these are Christian books in particular. I just enjoy the story. But I liked him, and I started looking for other books by C.S. Lewis and read some of his nonfiction. The book that I guess made the biggest difference was called Mere Christianity. And it's an interesting book because it was originally radio talks that he delivered over the BBC in England during World War II, because they were under attack, during the Battle of Britain. There were the air assaults from Germany, and the BBC asked him to give these talks to, in a way, to help rally the people, but also to strengthen their faith. And the subject is simply, what is Christianity? What do Christians believe, and why?
There are obviously religious institutions that probably attract people who lean more heavily towards faith-based answers. I've read about religious institutions that, as areas of study, they focus on young Earth creationism, Earth being 6,000 years old. I don't think that would be acceptable here at a public, research institution.
I think it's worth pointing out also that in general, religion and science, in my view, ask different questions. They deal with different things. Religion deals with questions for which you cannot go to the natural world and find those answers. Science deals by definition with things that you can go to the natural world and find the answers. Not that we found them all yet, but
yes,
you can do that in principle. So religion, in some sense, in my view, should restrict itself, well, at least in my opinion, should restrict itself to those questions which can't be answered directly from the natural world. For example, questions like, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? These are questions for which science offers no answers, and human beings oftentimes ponder them. So religion is one way to approach those questions. So one way to see a difference between religion and science is to just understand that they, in many cases, ask different questions. And if you keep those questions separate in your mind, then there doesn't necessarily have to be a conflict between one's religious beliefs and one's scientific understanding. I know scientists who are deeply religious, but I must say I don't know very many of them. But there are some who are, and I'm sure they realize that science is something which asks one type of question and provides one type of truth, and religion is something that asks different questions and provides a different type of truth which they find appealing. And I'm also reminded, one last comment, I'm reminded of what Galileo said. As you may know, he was the famous Italian astronomer who was the first human being to look up into the sky with a telescope and saw things that no one had seen before. And some of the conclusions he drew were contrary to the doctrine of the Catholic Church at that time. He was persecuted and put under house arrest. He stated at one point, so they say, that the Bible is a way to learn how to go to heaven, not to learn how the heavens go. And I think that is a succinct way of putting it.
You want to know how to shoot a rocket and make a satellite, you can figure that out just based on laws of physics. If you want to know what kind of person should I try to be, if what you want to know is what should I value the most, how much should I love another person, Should I want to fall in love? Is that a wise thing to do? Am I putting myself at risk? Am I going to lose something by sort of committing myself to another person? If those are the questions you want to know, physics has nothing to say. I don't think science is the highest kind of knowledge. I think it's, you might say, the most accurate kind of knowledge. But the most accurate isn't necessarily the highest. The highest kind is the kind that's about the things that are most important. And the pagan Greeks, by and large, did believe in God in some form. And the Greek philosophers, for the most part, believed in one God. Plato did, Aristotle did, the Stoics did. So, religious belief is already part of ancient philosophy. It's really only in fairly recent times, in the past, historically speaking, the past couple of 100 years, that philosophy has sort of distanced itself from theology and from thinking about God, and so a lot of philosophy today is purely secular. But for most of history, certainly through the ancient and medieval period, you really couldn't do philosophy without thinking about God, without trying to ground your philosophy ultimately in God, because God is simply the ultimate reality. And so it's kind of, really, if you think about it, it's hard to think about reality very systematically without having some belief in what's ultimate.
I don't deal with that conflict with students as a general rule. That is to say, it's not something I talk about in class. If a student should come up to me at some point and say, well, I understand what you said in the class is different from what I've been taught religiously, then I would be willing to talk to such a student individually. Actually, in over 30 years of teaching here, a place in this country where there are a fair amount of people with strong religious beliefs, I have very rarely, over all that time, been approached by a student with a concern along those lines.
I'd say in some ways it's sort of like the relation of a child and a parent. When you're a child growing up, you don't understand why your parents do some of what they do, why they insist on certain rules, or why they don't make some things easier than they are. I mean, you have all kinds of ideas about how they should be doing better than they're doing, right? And as you grow up, you gradually come to understand a lot of it. But you really won't, you'll never understand if you just have an attitude of resistance from the beginning. You have to have some attitude of faith and preferably love, in order to understand them from their own side. So I think it's a little like that in approaching God.